Welcome to Solo in the Shop, Season 2. Today, I want to give a quick shop update, but really I want to dig into what I got out of this year's WorkbenchCon, give you my feedback on what was good, bad, and some specifics from the classes that I took. Let's jump right in. Welcome to Solo in the Shop. I'm your host, Ronald Lowe's, and whether you're a weekend warrior crafting for friends and family, or a full-time maker turning your passion into a business, this podcast is for anyone who finds themselves alone in their shop covered in sawdust. Join me as I share my journey from hobbyist to the owner of New England Table Company. Together, let's navigate the joys and challenges of woodworking and entrepreneurship, one project at a time. Hello, friends. I just got back from WorkbenchCon last night, and I am pumped up to get back into the shop. And that's what happened last year, right? I went to WorkbenchCon, I talked to a ton of people, and I was really jazzed about social media, but I was even more so about podcasting. And this podcast actually started a year ago, now a year and a week ago, right after WorkbenchCon. And there was a good balance for me of talking about woodworking, talking about what's going on in the shop and my business, but also talking about podcasting. There's a lot of us woodworkers that are podcasting, and I made some great connections and had some discussions with people about that. And I'm hoping to have some big changes and big announcements coming up. That is in the works, but I'm not going to jinx it by talking about it right now. Real quick, in the shop, I got back and still recovering from a little disaster from last week. I may have mentioned I'm working on a desk for myself, and it's just a relatively short piece of black walnut, but I am putting pieces of my old Apple IIc from 1983 in epoxy in the back. So it'll be a wood surface and then epoxy in the back with pieces of my old computer in there. The issue is that I wanted a black base layer to kind of set off because the pieces are green and white, and so I wanted it to look right. So I wanted this base layer, and I poured the base layer, and of course I came back the next day and it had just run out everywhere and made a god-awful mess. So I have to clean that up, and I wasn't going to clean it up while it was wet because I feel like cleaning up sticky, wet epoxy is just a horrible job. So it is all dry now, and I'm going to do some combination of chipping it off and sanding it off of the red table. Luckily, there's tuck tape all over the table, so it hopefully will not stick a whole lot. But I need that table so that I can start flattening other stuff, because that's where I put my rails and my router sled. I have two big spalted maple dining tables that need flattening. So I really need that table. So the desk project needs to get relocated somewhere level and safe. And then I'm going to seal up again the mold/frame that I put around that desk and try the epoxy again. One of the good things about having it leak out like that is it fills all the voids and hardens, and so it should be watertight now. We'll see. I also have another Catalpa coffee table to make and a Catalpa console table that I'm making. Both of those are going to Circle Furniture, hopefully by the end of the week. So that's kind of what's going on in the shop. I've got a couple other deals that I've closed, but they are on the horizon. One of them, they don't want their table and bench, their dining set, until the end of May. So luckily I have a date promised field in my order tracking system, so I can be aware that when I need to start it and when I don't need to start it. But I got the deposit, so it is time to order the material for that one. But let's talk about WorkbenchCon. There, I would say my overall impression was, one, I got a lot out of it. Now, it was not the same as last year, and from what I hear, it's not the same as it has been in years prior to that even. There were definitely fewer vendors there. The vendors that were there, I enjoyed talking to all of them. There was a lot of CNC stuff going on. Surf Prep was there with their sanding products. Vetric was there with their control software for CNC. Carveco was there. A lot of the big names. Wall Control was there. So it's a lot of the usual suspects. Good to talk to them, see what they're doing. But I would say there was 50% of the vendors that were there last year. I think last year we had 2 full rows of vendors, and this year it was kind of one merry-go-round of vendors in the main exhibit area, and then probably 6 or 7 or 8 vendors in the gathering area. So there were definitely fewer vendors. There were also some food issues. I feel like anytime you have a large convention, food issues become hard to manage. And I'm not saying that it's definitely the organizer's fault, but, you know, second breakfast, I got down there was still half an hour of breakfast time left, and there was no food. There were no plates. There was no food. There was no food coming. The first breakfast, I got a coffee and breakfast. Breakfast was fine. But then at 10:01, I went to the coffee station, and all the coffee urns were empty. And the message from the staff was coffee was provided until 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is past. There is no more coffee coming. So that was kind of irritating. I feel like coffee is an all-day thing that, you know, how much does it cost to keep coffee going, you know, throughout the day? And maybe that's where my overall impression is that for the price of the ticket and the price of the hotel and what it takes to get down there, I'm expecting a little more pampering and a lot less being chintzy, cheap. There were definitely fewer people there, especially when it came to meeting top tier content creators. You know, Jason Hibbs was not there. Keith Johnson was not there. Cam Anderson from Blacktail was not there. Eric Curtis and Larissa Huff, not there. Sedge from Festool, not there. Jason Bent was there, but he didn't have a ticket, so he was there for the lobby, which worked out great. I mean, I spent a lot of the first evening talking with him. I don't know that he got a lot out of our conversation, but I did. So I appreciated him being there. So if you're friends with Jason Bent, tell him I said thanks. Anyway, but the flip side of having fewer people attending, because there were fewer people overall, I mean, the rooms were not crowded. But the flip side of that is that it was very intimate and very inclusive, meaning that those of us who are kind of on the smaller account side had a lot of access to the resources that were there, both the speakers and the workshop people, the vendors, and then to each other. You know, the networking events I took advantage of, and there was a lot of networking going on. And in fact, one of my favorite moments from the whole weekend was really the conference part was over, you know, the end of Saturday, but there were a lot of people still hanging around. And I went downstairs around 6 o'clock, and it was just me. I didn't have anyone that was hanging around that I was spending a lot of time with, but I walked through, and the guys from Beat Around the Bench podcast yelled over to me, "Hey, Ron, do you want to join us for dinner? We're going over to the Battery." And that felt great. You know, it was nice to have made connections over the weekend, but it felt a little more real when someone says, "I see you're walking around alone. Come with us. We're going to head over here." And when we did go over, we kept running into, I keep calling them pods, other pods of makers. And, you know, we're all saying hi, we're all chatting, small talk, whatever. But it was great to see everybody and be included. It was not like, you know, a high school schoolyard where it's very cliquey and you can feel left out. I did not feel left out at all. The classes that I went to, surprisingly useful. I know there was some negative talk about how the class presenters were selected. Basically, it was WorkbenchCon organizers taking submissions from people that wanted to give a talk. And they did, as far as I know, they didn't get paid. They got, free admission into the conference. So I think there was an expectation that the quality was going to be quite low, but I got a lot out of all the classes that I went to. And I'll dig in more in just a minute about that. There were also, I felt, more hands-on opportunities. There was, carving knife handles, and Brittany Carbone did a epoxy workshop, and people are walking around with their projects, and it was great. I think last year I felt like the hands-on parts were pretty minimal and pretty rudimentary, and this year it was a little riskier with the epoxy and the carving. They also had the toy box build off at the end, which was entertaining. It was a little long, I think, but I think once you think about what it takes to build something in an hour, it was probably just the right time. You want to make it a challenge and be like, you have to do it within this time limit. And they added some fun elements with making it kind of obstacle course based. So that was entertaining, and congrats to Team 1 on winning that. Anyway, some of the specifics for the classes that I went to, Josh Booth gave a talk on getting better and more consistent photos out of any camera. And the overall message I got from that, and I'm passing this free tip along, is to avoid using your camera or your phone's automatic settings, because I think of it like getting spicy food at a American restaurant. It's kind of made for the masses. It's always in the middle, where your specific taste may be different. And one of the things he said was, the biggest thing was your camera is looking for this middle gray color, and it tries to base everything off of that, and it adjusts its exposure and its aperture to reach that specific color somewhere in your photo, preferably in the focal point. And rather than letting your camera make those decisions, because it's going to possibly change from shot to shot and from moment to moment if you're taking video, is to get an app that lets you manually control all the settings, and then set up your shot. Use color cards that show what middle gray looks like, or what your white point is, your white balance, and get all of that set and locked in, and then take your photos from there. That way, you've got good color, you've got good exposure. He recommended, among others, an app called Pro Camera. It was about $30, but I think it's pay once and you're done. I've installed that and I started playing with it. You can definitely get better photos with that, and you do get this great control. I feel like I need maybe some YouTube training on that particular software just to get better at that and understanding what I'm doing, because there are a lot of controls. So that was Josh Booth and his photo tips. I had said in the last podcast that I was really looking forward to meeting Zach Vaught, and I spent quite a bit of time talking with him before his session. I went to his session and then had a couple conversations with him afterwards. I still get a lot out of all those talks. I think he is a really great resource for anyone who's trying to make a go at building furniture, building a woodworking business, especially if you're switching to full-time, you're in your garage and trying to maximize your exposure, your sales, and your cash flow and your growth. Things that I took out of his class specifically, and it's so funny because it's something I'm going through right now, is collect your deposit up front, use that deposit to buy the materials. And that takes discipline, not to kite one project to pay for another project and then hope that you get another, so that you end up behind the eight ball. You don't want to end up there. And I have at times, and I think we all do. But then make the balance due upon completion of the project. not on delivery. And that is because when you're managing cash flow, having somebody's project, or in my case, projects, done and sitting in your small space for weeks and months is very inconvenient and potentially problematic. I would hate to, one, damage any of the tables that are done and waiting to be delivered, but it also takes up a lot of space. And when you're building in a garage, there needs to be some way to offload projects that are done and get it so that you can keep being efficient and building in your shop. And I've got a customer right now. I finished 3 different tables for them, and they had originally said they wanted it for the end of January. Then they said, it's looking a little bit later, so I got it done by mid-February, and it's all done. And one of them is 10.5 feet long, and they're telling me end of March, maybe the 1st of April now. And it's a problem. It's a real problem, because now I have to get it out of the shop, but that means I've got these 3 tables that are going to be hanging out inside my lake house. And again, they're at risk, and it's not how I want to run my business, storing stuff in my house. So at the same time, I could use the money, right? I'm paying a guy for some part-time help. I'm paying people to do renderings, and cash flow is a thing. So the work is done and I need to get paid. So I'm kind of thinking I need to send an email and carefully word something that says, I know we said on delivery, but your work is done, and I need to collect so that I can continue running my business. So I got to think about, I don't know, maybe AI has some suggestions on how to word that in a way that will be compelling and friendly at the same time. That's a delicate balance, right? So that was one of the things from Zach. Scheduling dates and not missing dates, very important for running your business. One of the things I thought was funny is he said, you should know your oh crap number. And for me, being a one-man shop, I would say my oh crap number is somewhere around $1,500. And all that means is once I see that in my operating account, I have to implement some kind of spending freeze. And even if it means delaying some projects, I have to focus on getting more deposits and get money into the business before I spend more. And I certainly can't be buying nice to have tools or doing any kind of upgrades. It's got to be very Spartan and only buying what you absolutely have to have in order to finish projects and start getting paid some more. So having that number and being aware of where you are, obviously the smaller you are, the more important it is to have a real feeling of what your cash flow looks like and what your bank account looks like. And that's probably even daily. And that doesn't necessarily change as you get bigger. The numbers get bigger, and maybe the cash going in and out, on a daily basis goes from, a few hundred here and there to thousands in and out every day, every week. And knowing when you're getting dangerously close is important. And then buying with the deposit and not using that money to pay for other projects, I think is a discipline and a practice that's pretty important. And like I said, we've all been there where we just need the money. Something's come up. For me, it's, taxes and car payments and stuff like that. And it's like, man, when there is a lull in cash flow, kind of look forward to getting a deposit so that I can recover. So that was Zach's talk. He has a lot of good ideas, and a lot of them I was familiar with only because I know his podcast. I listen to him all the time. But those were things that came out in his class, in his session, that I got a lot of value out of. The last thing I wanted to talk about was I went to a Pinterest marketing class, like how to grow your brand on Pinterest. And it was funny. I was in this class and I was sitting next to Ricky TV, and he and I were in the class for two very different reasons. And hopefully he got out of it what he needed. I know I got what I needed. And basically, even though the idea of the class, the title of the class was using Pinterest to grow your brand, I wanted to use Pinterest to grow my business, meaning I want to use it to help me sell things. Where Ricky wanted to use Pinterest to grow his brand and his brand awareness and attention. And that's what he wants out of Pinterest. And I guess one of the first things, and it was funny, before class started, the guy Abraham from Grace Lane Company was giving the talk, and Ricky was very surprised that it was a dude that was giving a talk on Pinterest. And the Grace Lane Company logo and color scheme and everything like that is very feminine. And it's a well-known fact that Pinterest is predominantly browsed by women, but that doesn't mean that men can't take advantage of it and shouldn't. Abraham kept telling the story that one of his most successful clients is somebody that sells auto parts on Pinterest. So there is a market, there is a use for it. A couple big ideas that came out of that was on Pinterest, you can either get profile views or you can get click-throughs over to your website or your product page or wherever. And in general, pins that use static images are more likely to get click-throughs to your website, to your product page. And videos are more likely to send people to your profile. So if you just want Ricky TV type attention, then videos are the way to go. And if you're like me and you want people to click over and look at your products and potentially buy, then static images are more the way to go. So that was new information for me. I do use Pinterest, and I have in the past, where I've linked my Instagram right to Pinterest. So whatever I post on Instagram goes to Pinterest. Pinterest normally takes the music off of my reels because I use Epidemic Sound. So that music is whitelisted for YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and something else, and not for Pinterest. And in fact, I don't think, last I looked, that there was a way to whitelist a Pinterest account with Epidemic Sound. So what happens is I get a notification all the time saying, hey, your video's been muted because of a copyright issue. And there's no penalty for that. It's just, if somebody's got the sound on, then maybe my funky music isn't going to be playing in the background. No big deal. But when you link a reel directly through Pinterest, all that happens is that when they click through, they get sent over to that Instagram reel. And that's questionable value, right? That is what I would call friction between potential consumer and product. What is more valuable is having something where the pin links directly to a landing page or a product page. And so that was an important bit of info for me. The bigger, more important message, and I think it was huge for me, is Pinterest is not a marketplace. It is not where you go to sell your stuff. You sell your stuff either on your website, your Etsy page, your Shopify page, wherever, right? Pinterest is an SEO tool. It is a billboard to advertise and then send people to the place where you're actually selling things. It is a measure of success if you can get people to see your pin and then get out of Pinterest as quickly as possible. The point is not to socialize, it's not a social media tool. It is, hey, look at this. Don't you want to come visit my website? Everything about making pins is related to SEO. You want a beautiful image, you want a compelling message, and you want keywords that will make your pin found when someone is searching for what you make. And Abraham, in his talk, walked us through how to identify keywords that are popular, how to use, for example, the Pinterest search bar to start typing and see what it auto-suggests, because the auto-suggest is a good indication also of what's trending on Pinterest. And then use those keywords embedded in your image, in the title of your pin, and in your description. And it doesn't mean just repeat them. It means use variations of those keywords repeatedly, especially in the description. And the description needs to be natural language. It can't be keyword stuffed. It needs to be a paragraph of about, 300 to 500 characters, and using those keywords in a way that when someone searches for what you make, you are improving your chances of your pin being found. And then have the link, the URL related to that, go to the right place, whether it is a landing page or a product page. If you're showing a glory picture of what you make, then the link should go right there, right? You want it to be as close to purchase as possible, because if you add steps, that's increasing friction, and increasing friction reduces the likelihood by a lot of getting any kind of sales. The other thing is that just like any other SEO, whether it's on your website or your social media or just thinking about Google search, there's a time lag between implementing something and being rewarded. On Pinterest, there is this pattern that you need to establish of posting and adding value, adding pins, so that the Pinterest algorithm starts to see you as a valuable member of the community, and your found pins start getting moved up in the rankings. Now, obviously, you can boost a pin, you can pay for it like an ad, but SEO, there's a time lag of 90 to 120 days between changing your behavior and the way you use Pinterest and seeing any measurable improvement. So the last thing that I took from that was that I need to be using Pinterest probably, at least 5 times a week. Now, what I've done to do that is, because you can schedule up to 70 pins at a time, is I have now a recurring task on every Saturday to spend an hour scheduling out my pins for the week. What do I want to promote? What links do I want to use? What new keywords do I want to take advantage of? And put all of that in place on Saturday so that I don't have to think about it for the rest of the week. I just know that there's new Pinterest content coming out and that I've applied the SEO optimizing that I want to use to keep those pins showing up and getting saved and getting clicked on. So, and then there's analytics, and I'm pretty sure I need to get a lot more clicks before I become any kind of analytics expert, but I definitely want to start looking at, over time, what's the trend, what's working, what's not working, kind of A/B test things and throw out what's not working. So that was the Pinterest class. I got a lot more out of that than I expected, and I made a good connection with Abraham, enough so that over time, as this works out or doesn't, he's invited me to let him know how it's going, and he'll give me some feedback. It is pricey to have someone take over your Pinterest, and I'd have to think about that one. I think my business needs to grow a little bit more before I add any more fixed expenses. Managing Pinterest might be a good one, because I don't necessarily need to become a Pinterest expert. There are Pinterest experts out there, and I think there's a lot of value in it. I think my customer base is shopping there all the time, So if those are eyeballs that I can direct over here, that would be great. That's what I have for you this week. Season 2 has started. Big plans coming, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Stay safe. A couple things before I get back to work. First, if you aren't already following this podcast, what are you doing? Hit follow so you don't miss a single episode. And then secondly, as a favor to me, could you leave a rating or a review wherever you listen? And be sure to share this show with any of your friends that need to tune in. As always, I'd love to hear from you at solointheshop@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you again soon.